lot of people have asked me for my cake recipe over the years. I make a lot of cupcakes, birthday cakes, you name it. I just like to make cakes. They're one of my favorite things to make. Every time someone asks me for my recipe, I always have to tell them, go get a cake mix. You gotta doctor up the cake mix. That's how I do it. Hi, I'm Caty and welcome to Caty's Kitchen Creations. Today we're going to be doctoring a cake mix, my favorite way to do it. And this one is just generic from Walmart. This works with most brands out there. I haven't had a huge difference between most of the brands that I use. I do have a few favorites for, the chocolate one or whatever, but this is my favorite way to do it. It does vary a little bit if I use the chocolate. I'll let you know in the end in the recipe what I do a little bit different to get the chocolate one to taste a little bit better. But these just turn out so moist. Such a good crumb. They just are so delicious. And like I said, everybody always asks me for the recipe and I just always have to say, go grab you a cake mix. Okay, so let's get started. Like I said, this is just a generic cake mix from Walmart. The first thing that we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut open our cake mix package and we're just gonna dump it in. This one is just a white cake mix, so we're going to be making just vanilla cake today. So we're just going to go ahead and dump our cake mix into our mixer bowl. Next, I like to add a little extra flour. Also, I like to add extra salt. Salt really enhances the flavor of sweets and it helps cut down some of the sweetness. It helps just enhance that flavor, so I always add a little extra salt to my doctored cake mixes. One of my very favorite ingredients that I love to add to my doctored cake mixes is just instant pudding. My family is pretty much dye-free because of my children. The dyes do not affect them well, so we are pretty much dye-free. Recently, I realized that boxed pudding mixes usually have dyes in them. I did not know that. Now I do. So the other day I went to Walmart and they had this dye-free instant pudding. I haven't tried it yet. This is gonna be my first time using it in here. I'm just excited that I found an easy to access dye-free pudding mix. So this is just called Simple Mixes Pudding Mix. I'm not getting paid to promote this. This is just my first time using it. I'm just gonna let y'all know how it goes. I usually just use vanilla in most of my doctored cake mixes, but once in a while I'll add in chocolate or butterscotch or something if I'm trying to make a little bit of a different flavored cake. So we're gonna go ahead and dump in our instant pudding. Next, I like to add either water or milk. That's the amount that the box calls for. I find, in my personal experience, water tends to give a better texture than the milk. Sometimes if I use milk, the cake will sink in the middle or do something funky like that. So I find that it has the best texture when I just use water, but you can experiment. Try milk, try buttermilk. There are a lot of ways to doctor a cake mix. This is just the way that I usually do it. So I like to use water. Here's one of the biggest differences that I do to change up this box mix. Most boxed cake mixes call for 3 eggs. I add an additional egg and sometimes even an extra additional egg. So I use 4 eggs per cake mix. Sometimes I use 5. Generally I use 4. It gives a much better texture. The cake holds together better. The crumb is better. It's not so crumbly. You can cut a slice without it falling apart like boxed cake mixes tend to do sometimes. So 4 eggs. We're going to go ahead and dump that into our mixer bowl. The next thing I like to do is substitute the oil for melted butter, and that just gives a really, really rich, buttery flavor to the cake. It just makes it have a little bit better texture, and it just makes the cake so, so yummy. Often I don't have butter, and so then I will just go ahead and use oil, and that's okay. It still turns out great, especially when I add that extra egg. The melted butter really makes a huge difference. We're gonna pour in our melted butter. And finally, we're going to add some vanilla, and you all know my favorite, Mexican vanilla. So we're gonna go ahead and dump that in now. That just makes it extra vanilla-y, extra delicious. Add vanilla to all your baked goods. Add extra vanilla to all your baked goods because it's just so, so much better. So now we're gonna go ahead and just mix this up. I like to mix it just kind of on low speed for a few seconds, and then I scrape down the bowl, and then I turn it up. I usually set a timer for about 2 minutes or so. Your batter is going to kind of change color. It's going to get a little paler in color, and that's great. That's what we want. All right, so I still have some of the old batter on my spatula up here. You see how this is a darker color, this is a lighter color? That's what we're looking for. All right, so it's nice and pale yellow. So we're just going to make sure that we scrape down the bottom of the bowl, make sure that there's no little clumps that got caught down there or around the edges. Just give it a kind of good little mix with your rubber spatula. All right, so now what we need to do is get our pans ready. I often get them ready first, but I wanted to show you how to get one of them ready. So I have already gotten one pan ready. Today I'm just gonna make 2 9-inch rounds to stack into a little layer cake just for my family to eat. So I like to use just a Wilton 9-inch round. You can use whatever. You can make this into 24 cupcakes. You could make it into a 9x13. You can make it into a bundt cake. Any of those options work. But regardless, unless you're doing cupcakes and you're using cupcake liners, the best way to prepare your pan is to coat it with shortening completely and then dust it with flour. And I'm going to show you how to do that. This one's already ready. So I'm going to show you how to get your pan ready. I just have some generic shortening here. It doesn't matter. Just make sure you use vegetable shortening. It has the least taste to it. If you use regular shortening, it will just taint your treats a little bit. It works fine for some things, but I don't love it with sweets. So just make sure it's a vegetable shortening. You're gonna go ahead and either use your fingers, a pastry brush, a paper towel, you know, whatever works easiest for you. Today I'm just gonna use a paper towel. I'm just gonna kind of get a glob on my paper towel. And then I'm just going to spread it around in my pan like this. Just going to spread it around in there. I'm going to need a little bit more. Feel free to do it heavily. It doesn't need to be super heavy where you see big globs everywhere, but just coat that pan evenly. Make sure you get kind of in that crease where the bottom reaches the sides, because that's a place where cakes tend to stick. Using a paper towel just helps your fingers not to get so greasy, because shortening tends to be very difficult to wash off. You have to use lots and lots and lots of soap. Alright, I like to check this in the light because sometimes we miss a spot. I can see in the light and not miss any spots, so that looks great. Our next step is just going to be to dust this pan with some regular flour. Makes a mess. This step is very messy. I usually do this over the trash can or sometimes over the sink because it's so messy. But what you're going to want to do is you're just going to dump enough flour in there. It usually takes a tablespoon or two to just kind of coat your pan. And you're just going to kind of tap it until you can kind of see that it's gotten everywhere. I start with the bottom until I cover the bottom. I dip it on its side, and then I just kind of roll the pan until all the flour coats the sides, just like this. Yep, I'm making it myself my counter. Do this over your trash can, it's much better, but I just wanted you to be able to see what we're doing here. So I can see that all of my sides are coated, but we do not want all this extra flour. We don't want the edges of our cake to get gummy from extra flour in the pan. So then what I like to do is I just give it a good tap. Good tap. Sometimes it helps to just kind of bang it on the counter like that. And that shows us that we got most of our flour kind of down here to the bottom, and then you're just gonna dump that into the trash. So I'm gonna go do that. Sometimes it helps to tap it again just to get any residual flour out. Okay, our pans are coated, so we're gonna go ahead and just divide our batter evenly between these pans. If you're making cupcakes, just use all the batter, fill 24 muffin cups with it. If you're making a bundt cake, go ahead and just fill the whole thing with the batter. Same thing with a 9x13. Just use all of your batter. You shouldn't have any remaining batter with whatever size cake that you are doing. So let's go ahead and just divide our batter evenly between our pans. Alright, so I divided evenly. Now I'm just going to spread that around, make it kind of nice and even, smooth it out. Now sometimes when we mix our cake mix a lot, it incorporates a lot of air bubbles, which we want some air in cake. That's kind of what it gives it that fluffy texture, but we don't want big air pockets. So one of the things that I like to do with my cakes, cupcakes, whatever it is that I'm making, is I just drop my pan on the counter 3 to 4 times before I put them in the oven. It kind of helps release some of those air bubbles before we bake it. So we're just going to do that with each pan 3 to 4 times. Alright, now we're going to put these in our preheated oven and we're just going to bake them until they are done. And I will show you how to know when the cake is done so that you don't have a dry cake. Depending on the size cake you're making, cupcakes usually take 12 to 15 minutes, sometimes a little longer. Cakes this size can take up to 30 minutes, depending on the cake. Sometimes it's only 18 or 20. So just keep an eye on it. I like to just set my timer, unless I'm making cupcakes, I like to just set my timer for about 15 minutes and I just look through the glass on my oven. I don't open it to check unless it looks like it might be getting golden and done. I just like to keep an eye on it, make sure that I am not going to bake them for too long. So like I said, I'm going to start my timer for 15 minutes. Don't open your oven if you're going to check. If you keep opening the oven on cake, it will make it fall. You'll have a big hole in the center of your cake and it won't work very good. So let's just put these in our oven and we're just going to keep an eye on them. One of the things that helps you know when cake is done is called the spring test. So you just use your finger, make sure your fingers are clean. You just use your finger and you just gently touch the top of the cake. Once it's looking kind of golden, kind of, puffed up in the oven, just kind of touch that cake lightly with your finger. If it kind of indents and you can kind of feel that it's gooey under there, or if it indents and the indent stays indented, your cake is not done yet. What you want your cake to do is to spring back when you lightly touch it with your finger. If it's springing back, most likely it's done. The next thing that you can do to test that is to go ahead and use a toothpick or a cake tester. You're just going to poke that right in the middle. If it comes out with any sort of wet batter on it, go ahead and set your timer for 1 to 2 more minutes, unless it's, you're jiggling your pan and it's really not done. But if it's coming out with a little bit of batter on it, just set your timer for 1 to 2 minutes. Keep checking, keep doing that spring test, because if you bake it for too long, you're going to have a dry cake that nobody wants to eat. So you just want to do this in 1 to 2 minute increments once you get to that point so that you don't over bake your cake. What you want with the toothpick is for just some moist crumbs to come out on your toothpick. No batter, just moist crumbs. If it comes out completely dry, you might have overbaked your cake, but it will probably be okay. Alright, so it looks like I divided my batter in my pans just a little bit unevenly, which is fine because I'm just making it for my family. So I'm going to show you how I know that this is ready. So we're going to go ahead and do the spring test here. It's springing right back. Stick our toothpick in. Comes out with moist crumbs, so that's perfect. Now this next thing I'm going to do is going to be a little bit controversial. Some people do not like that I do this to my cakes, but it works for me. It makes the texture better, so I'm going to show you now. So I like to take my clean oven mitt, and I like to, as soon as my cake comes out of the oven, I like to kind of smash it down a little bit like this. You're not smashing the cake, you're just kind of gently pressing on it. And that kind of evens out the top of your cake, makes it so that you don't actually have to cut the top off. And you just kind of go all the way around the cake and just gently press. And now I'm just going to let this sit here on this cooling rack in this pan for about 10 minutes before I dump it onto the cooling rack. Alright, this layer just took another couple of minutes from that one. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and just press here. It just kind of helps level out that cake. Leave these here for about 10 minutes, then we're going to dump them onto our cooling racks. Alright, so these have been sitting for about 10 minutes or so. We're just going to go ahead and dump them onto our cooling racks. A lot of times I just go ahead and wrap them up in plastic wrap immediately, throw them in the freezer so that I can get to decorating them faster because sometimes they take a while. I like to work with frozen layers. If you want, you can cool these on your cooling racks before you freeze them, or you can wrap them up immediately. I find that wrapping them up in plastic wrap immediately tends to help lock in some of that moisture that they would normally steam out when they're just sitting out on the cooling rack. But it's up to you. They do just fine as well, just cooling on the cooling rack for 30 minutes or so. And like I said, I like to work with frozen layers. I just find it a lot easier to assemble the cake and frost it without having to worry about it bending or anything like that because it's frozen. You know, it's a stiff structure to work with. So yeah, let's just go ahead and dump these out. See how that just glides right out of our pan, no problems there. Just put your cooling rack right on top and then just flip over. Just glides right out. So that shortening and flour mixture really helps release the cake. It's a great cake release. And don't forget to follow along next week for my American Buttercream tutorial. That's it for today. Thanks for watching Caty's Kitchen Creations. Don't forget to like and subscribe.